Have you ever wondered why some people experience profound healing while others struggle, despite having the same faith? What if the power to heal your mind, body, and soul has been within you all along, waiting to be activated through a method so simple, yet so profound, that most people overlook it? The healing miracles of Jesus have fascinated humanity for centuries. But what if these weren't supernatural suspensions of natural law, but rather perfect demonstrations of spiritual principles that you can apply in your own life today? What if the Master wasn't showing off divine power, but rather teaching us a precise method that works as reliably as gravity when properly understood? When we look closely at the healing ministry of Jesus, we discover something revolutionary. He wasn't breaking laws, he was fulfilling them. Every restoration of sight, every cleansing of disease, every return to wholeness followed an exact pattern, a divine sequence that transforms the seemingly miraculous into the methodical. Has this ever happened to you? You've prayed fervently for healing or transformation, yet felt disconnected from the results you seek. Many of us have been taught to beg an external God for intervention, when the truth is far more empowering. The Christ presence, that perfect pattern of divine harmony, already dwells within you. Stay with me until the end, because this distinction is crucial. There's a profound difference between Jesus the person, that luminous teacher who walked among us, and the Christ principle he embodied. Jesus was the messenger. Christ is the eternal presence of truth, life, and love that he manifested. And this same Christ principle resides at the core of your being, waiting for your recognition. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. This is not mere theology, it's practical spiritual science. Your conscious mind chooses and plants, your subconscious gestates and multiplies, your body faithfully harvests. The body doesn't argue or conspire against you, it simply copies with perfect fidelity the emotional patterns and mental images you consistently hold. This is why our work isn't to battle against flesh, but to straighten the idea that shapes it. What you're about to discover might surprise you. The so-called miracles of healing, the straightened limbs, restored vision, calmed fevers, aren't capricious heavenly interventions, but demonstrations of an exact sequence you can learn and apply. Seeing the truth beyond appearances, speaking with quiet authority, performing a simple anchoring action, and maintaining the protective silence that allows transformation to take root. The method I'm about to share doesn't promise instantaneous cures, but rather activates the healing potential already within you. It honors prudence while teaching you to cooperate with the divine intelligence that maintains every function of your body. Where medical attention is needed, we go without fear, blessing those professionals as instruments of the same universal good. This understanding completely transforms our traditional approach to healing. When Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you," he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He wasn't pointing to some distant celestial realm or future paradise. He was revealing perhaps the most revolutionary truth of his entire ministry, that the divine healing presence resides at the very core of your being, waiting not for permission, but for recognition and consent. Think about the profound implications of this hidden truth. We've been conditioned to look outward for salvation, searching the horizons for answers that have always resided within. This inner kingdom isn't a theological concept, but a living reality, a realm of perfect harmony, divine intelligence, and restorative power that operates through you when you align with its principles. The journey inward reveals why some prayers seem to work while others don't. It's never been about convincing an external deity to intervene in your affairs. Rather, it's about activating this inner healing intelligence through specific mindset shifts and practices that Jesus demonstrated with remarkable consistency. This brings us to the extraordinary relationship between mind and body, a relationship that science is only now beginning to comprehend. Your conscious mind functions as the gatekeeper, the decision-maker that chooses which seeds to plant. Like a farmer carefully selecting what will grow in fertile soil, you consciously select thoughts, images, and beliefs. Your subconscious mind, far more powerful than most realize, serves as the gestational field where these seeds take root, multiply, and grow. It doesn't judge the quality of what you plant. It simply nurtures whatever receives your consistent attention and emotional investment. This explains why persistent worry often manifests as physical tension, while sustained peace creates bodily harmony. The body completes this trinity as the faithful harvester. It doesn't debate with you or resist your instructions. It simply and precisely copies the patterns established in your mental and emotional terrain. If you dictate fear, it copies contraction. If you dictate peace, it copies harmony. The body isn't your enemy to be battled against. It's your most loyal copyist, awaiting clearer instructions. This revelation completely transforms our approach to health challenges. The transformation begins not by fighting against bodily conditions, but by straightening the ideas that shape them. When we accept that our physical experience largely reflects our interior landscape, every symptom becomes not just a problem to eliminate, but a message pointing toward mental patterns needing realignment. Behind the scenes of every healing Jesus performed was this fundamental principle. He never struggled against the flesh itself, but addressed the deeper template. With the woman who hemorrhaged for 12 years, with the man born blind, with the leper cast out from society. In each case, Jesus redirected attention from the physical manifestation to the spiritual reality, from the imperfect copy to the perfect original. Now, I want to go even deeper into this essential method by examining the precise sequence Jesus followed. This pattern appears consistently throughout his ministry, revealing a spiritual technology so reliable that when properly understood and applied, it creates what observers can only call miraculous. Yet these weren't violations of natural law, but demonstrations of higher principles working with mathematical precision. The impact of understanding this method extends far beyond physical healing. It transforms relationships, finances, and our entire experience of life by addressing the root of all manifestation, consciousness itself. The same principles that restore sight to blind eyes can bring clarity to confused decisions and harmony to troubled circumstances. Do you recognize this pattern operating in your own life? Right, I see the connection in the comments. If you've noticed how your thoughts and feelings eventually show up as your physical experience. The paradigm shift I'm inviting you to consider fundamentally transforms our understanding of what miracles actually are. What we've traditionally viewed as supernatural interruptions of natural law are in reality demonstrations of an exact spiritual sequence, a divine algorithm, if you will, that operates with mathematical precision when correctly applied. This revelation doesn't diminish the wonder. It enhances it by making the miraculous accessible. When we examine the healing works of Jesus with fresh eyes, a consistent pattern emerges. First, he saw the truth beyond appearances, perceiving the perfect spiritual template beneath the distorted material picture. While others saw leprosy, blindness, or paralysis, Jesus recognized the unaltered child of God. This vision wasn't wishful thinking, but accurate spiritual perception of what truly is. Second, he gave the word of authority, not pleading or hoping, but calmly declaring from that place of clear seeing. Be clean. Receive your sight. Take up your bed and walk. These weren't desperate petitions, but serene commands issued from perfect alignment with divine principle. Notice the brevity, the present tense. the quiet confidence. These weren't coincidental but essential elements of effective spiritual declaration. Third, Jesus executed a simple action that anchored the word in the visible realm, touching the leper, making clay for the blind man's eyes, instructing the paralytic to carry his mat. These symbolic acts weren't theatrical additions but practical, bridges connecting inner realization to outer manifestation. They provided a pathway for consciousness to express through tangible experience. Finally, and perhaps most overlooked, he maintained the silence that protects the germinating transformation. Tell no one, he often instructed. This wasn't about secrecy for its own sake, but about spiritual hygiene. The newly planted seed needs protection from the harsh winds of collective doubt and the freezing frost of skepticism. This operative silence creates sacred space for divine order to establish itself without interference. If you found this approach to healing resonating with your spirit, hit subscribe to join our community of truth seekers applying these timeless principles in their daily lives. There's so much more to explore together on this journey of transformation. The journey toward mastering this method requires a clear ethical framework. We don't promise instantaneous cures as if performing magic tricks. Instead, we recognize our role in activating potential and honoring prudence. This work isn't about competing with medical science, but complementing it with spiritual understanding. When physical attention is needed, we seek it without fear, blessing healthcare professionals as instruments of the same divine good that works through all channels. This balanced approach represents the authentic integration of spirituality and practicality. We're not practicing superstition dressed in religious language. We're applying spiritual principles with the same rigor that a scientist applies natural laws. The phrase, "pray with science and live with method," captures this perfectly, bringing precision to our spiritual practice and divine awareness to our practical living. Behind this framework lies a profound respect for both divine order and human responsibility. Jesus never displayed the spiritual arrogance that refuses prudent measures in the name of faith. His every healing demonstrated harmony between heaven and earth, between the unseen principle and its visible expression. This balance offers a roadmap for our own healing journey, neither ignoring practical wisdom nor limiting ourselves to material methods alone. The most remarkable aspect of this approach is how it elevates our understanding of prayer from desperate pleading to conscious cooperation. We're not convincing a reluctant deity to intervene. We're aligning ourselves with the perfect pattern already established in divine mind. This alignment doesn't happen through emotional intensity, but through clear recognition, calm declaration, symbolic action, and protective silence. Let's explore how this sequence manifests in specific healing accounts, revealing both consistency of method and flexibility of application. The blueprint remains the same, while the expression adapts to each unique situation. If you're beginning to recognize this divine sequence operating in your own experiences of healing or transformation, type I. See the pattern in the comments below. One of the most overlooked yet crucial elements of Jesus' healing method is what I call operative silence. After seeing the truth, speaking the word of authority, and performing the anchoring action, Jesus frequently instructed those he healed, "Tell no one about this." This wasn't some cryptic request for secrecy or a marketing strategy to create mystery. It was a profound spiritual principle that protects the transformation process during its most vulnerable stage. Think of it as spiritual gardening wisdom. No sensible gardener plants a seed and then digs it up every few hours to check on its progress. Yet this is precisely what we often do with our spiritual work. We declare a healing truth, then immediately begin analyzing, questioning, doubting, and discussing it with anyone who will listen. This constant uprooting disrupts the invisible processes through which transformation unfolds. The journey of manifestation requires protection. When you've planted a powerful spiritual idea, the subconscious mind needs undisturbed time to work with it. Every time you revisit the problem, rehearse the symptoms, or seek validation from others, you're essentially disturbing the delicate roots that are trying to establish themselves in new soil. This is why many sincere spiritual efforts seem to fail. Not because the principle isn't working, but because we've interrupted its natural unfoldment through our impatience. This revelation explains why Jesus often took people away from crowds before healing them, why he frequently urged them not to publicize what had happened. He understood the hidden mechanics of consciousness, that new paradigms are fragile in their early stages and require protection from the collective doubt and fear that surrounds us. The operative silence isn't passive waiting, it's active protection of sacred inner work. Another profound insight that liberates our spiritual practice concerns the relationship between faith and emotion. Many sincere seekers abandon their spiritual work because they don't feel anything happening. This misunderstanding has derailed countless healing journeys. The truth is refreshingly simple. The law responds to the recognized idea, not to fluctuating emotion. Spiritual law operates with mathematical precision, regardless of how you feel about it. Just as gravity works whether you're emotionally invested in it or not, the principle of divine healing responds to clear recognition rather than emotional intensity. This understanding frees us from the exhausting pursuit of generating special feelings or maintaining perpetual enthusiasm. The architect doesn't need to feel emotionally moved by his blueprints. He simply needs to draw them accurately. Your responsibility in this process is straightforward. See the truth beyond appearances. Speak your word with quiet authority. Perform the anchoring action and maintain protective silence. The rest belongs to the principle itself. This isn't abdication of responsibility, but proper recognition of boundaries. You plant and water. The growth itself comes through a power beyond your conscious control. This distinction explains why some of the most dramatic healings have come through practitioners who felt nothing special during their work. They simply recognized the truth with crystal clarity and allowed the principle to operate without interference. Their emotional state was irrelevant to the outcome because they understood that spiritual law responds to the recognized idea, not to how they felt about that idea. The mindset shift this creates is truly liberating. Instead of exhausting yourself trying to generate and maintain certain emotional states, you can focus your energy on clarity of perception and precision of declaration. Instead of constantly checking for evidence of progress, you can rest in the assurance that the principle is working according to its nature, not according to your timetable or supervision. If these insights have sparked a new understanding for you today, a simple like helps this message reach others who might be searching for exactly this perspective in their healing journey. Let's examine how this understanding transforms our practical approach to applying Jesus' method in everyday challenges. When we grasp that operative silence is not passive waiting, but active protection, and that faith is clear recognition rather than emotional fervor, our entire practice becomes more grounded and consistent. If you've experienced the frustration of constantly checking on your spiritual seeds only to find them not growing as expected, type "I'm learning patience" in the comments below. To bring this method into practical application, I want to share two simple yet profoundly effective resources that can become anchors in your daily practice. These tools don't require special training or elaborate rituals, just consistent, mindful application that gradually rewires your relationship with the healing intelligence within you. The first resource is the daily reading of Psalm 91, but with a crucial transformation in how you approach it. Most people read sacred texts as spectators, observing beautiful poetry about someone else's experience of divine protection. The breakthrough happens when you shift from spectator tone to heir tone. When you read, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High," don't admire it from a distance. Claim it internally by saying, "I dwell in the shelter of the Most High." This simple shift activates your inheritance. You're not begging for protection, you're recognizing what already belongs to you by divine right. Read slowly, as if drinking clear water. Each verse becomes not just inspiring literature, but living law, operating through your consciousness. After completing the reading, observe a minute of silence to allow the truth to settle into your awareness without analysis or debate. The second resource is a symbolic act of consecration that bridges mind and body. Either standing or seated, place your hand over your heart for 1 minute. With gentle authority, declare once, "I consecrate my mind and body to God's order and love." Then remain in silence. Feel your pulse beneath your palm. That pulse is heaven's metronome in your chest. This isn't theatrical gesture, but practical alignment, setting the compass of your being toward your true north. The revolutionary insight behind these practices is their ability to establish new pathways in consciousness. Every time you read as an heir rather than a spectator, you're reinforcing your authentic spiritual identity. Each time you consecrate your mind and body to divine order, you're creating a template that your subconscious mind begins to accept as your new normal. Now, let's explore the transformative practice of speaking to your body with proper authority. Most people relate to their bodies in one of two dysfunctional ways, either pleading with them like beggars, "Please, body, be well," or battling against them as enemies. Jesus demonstrated a completely different relationship, speaking with the gentle but firm jurisdiction of a child of God. This jurisdiction isn't arrogant domination, but natural birthright. When you understand that your body is designed to express the perfect pattern of the Christ consciousness within you, you speak not from desperation, but from recognition of an already established truth. Your words become less like anxious petitions and more like calm instructions to a faithful servant. The blueprint for this communication involves substituting images of fear with images of truth. Instead of visualizing disease spreading, see divine order establishing itself. Rather than rehearsing worst-case scenarios, contemplate the body's extraordinary intelligence returning to perfect balance. The body doesn't argue with these images. It faithfully copies whatever picture you consistently hold before it. This practice extends to forgiveness, which becomes not a moral obligation, but a practical key that opens doors to healing. Unforgiveness creates constriction in mind and body. Forgiveness restores circulation on all levels. You forgive not as one who surrenders to injustice, but as one who opens prison doors, freeing yourself first and others consequently. Even sleep transforms within this framework. Instead of collapsing into unconsciousness carrying the day's worries, you learn to sleep as one who deliberately delivers their house to the night master. The Christ intelligence that works more effectively when conscious interference steps aside. Your last thoughts before sleep become not anxious reviews, but confident commissions, knowing the divine healer works while you rest. These practices represent not just spiritual concepts, but a complete reorientation to your body-mind relationship. They establish you in a position of enlightened stewardship, rather than fearful victimhood, creating a foundation for lasting transformation instead of temporary relief. If you've noticed how differently your body responds when you speak to it with authority versus when you plead with it in fear, type, "I'm changing my conversation," in the comments. The most liberating revelation in this entire approach is that the inner Christ, our healer, is not a future promise waiting to be fulfilled, but a present reality already functioning within you. This transforms our entire orientation from one of desperate seeking to one of conscious recognition. We're not trying to attract a distant healing presence. We're acknowledging the divine intelligence that has been orchestrating every heartbeat, cell division, and breath since the moment you were conceived. This perspective shift represents a profound paradigm revolution. Most healing approaches position wholeness as a distant goal to be achieved through struggle, discipline, or divine intervention. Jesus' method inverts this entirely. Wholeness is your original state, your divine blueprint, your spiritual DNA. The healing work isn't creating something new, but revealing what has always been true beneath temporary distortions. When we truly recognize this, not as theological concept, but as lived reality, something remarkable happens that Jesus described as the right idea taking the plumb line. In construction, a plumb line uses gravity's natural pull to establish perfect verticality. Similarly, when we align with the truth of our being, the inner Christ principle begins to establish proper order without struggle. The house straightens itself. Subscribe to continue uncovering the hidden wisdom in Jesus' healing method. Each video peels back another layer of this divine science that can transform your relationship with mind, body, and spirit. This explains why many who experience profound healing report that nothing happened in the moment of transformation. No lightning, bolts, no emotional drama, just a quiet shift into alignment with what has always been true. The spectacular healing manifestations that follow are simply the outer form catching up with the inner recognition. The inner workings of this process become clearer when we grasp the foundational truth that there is only one power. This statement might seem simplistic at first glance, but its implications are revolutionary. We're not referring to a distant deity who grants favors on a whim, but to the living principle that sustains the cosmos and breathes in your chest. This singular power doesn't compete with other powers. It is the only genuine power there is. When this truth is recognized, not just intellectually agreed with but embodied, other supposed powers vanish like mist at dawn. Fear loses its grip when we see it has no independent power of its own. Physical conditions that seem to have autonomous authority reveal themselves as temporary expressions awaiting correction through alignment with the one power. Behind the scenes of our struggles with health, relationships, and circumstances lies this hidden battleground. To which power will you grant authority in your consciousness? Every time you say, "I can't because," or "this condition prevents me from," you're attributing power to something other than the divine principle. This divided loyalty creates the very limitations we're trying to overcome. Jesus demonstrated absolute fidelity to one power. When facing blindness, he didn't see a power opposing divine sight. When encountering leprosy, he didn't recognize a power competing with divine wholeness. This unwavering recognition wasn't magical thinking, but clear spiritual perception of what is ultimately real beyond temporary appearances. This single power perspective transforms our entire approach to healing challenges. Instead of battling against conditions as if they possessed legitimate power, we withdraw our mental consent from them. We don't fight darkness, we turn on the light. We don't struggle against disease, we recognize the already functioning divine template that knows nothing of disease. The journey into this consciousness isn't accomplished through force of will, but through consistent recognition. Every time you catch yourself attributing power to something other than God, gently correct your perspective. This isn't a power. God is the only power here. This isn't denial of challenges, but proper placement of authority. It's not that the challenge doesn't exist as appearance, it's that it has no legitimate power of its own. If you've ever experienced that moment of clarity when something that previously seemed so powerful suddenly lost its grip on you, type "I've witnessed the mist vanish" in the comments. The law of correspondence serves as the fundamental grammar of spiritual reality, revealing how our outer experience aligns with our inner state of consciousness. This principle explains the mechanics behind every healing Jesus performed and every transformation we seek to create. Simply stated, manifestation follows idea. The external form faithfully mirrors the internal template. Jesus expressed this with crystal clarity when he said, "According to your belief, be it done to you." This wasn't a poetic flourish or religious sentiment, but a precise articulation of spiritual law. He was revealing the operating system of reality itself, the causal relationship between consciousness and experience. Your inner convictions aren't just private thoughts. They're creative blueprints that the universe faithfully reproduces in tangible form. Your body stands as the most intimate demonstration of this principle. It functions as a magnificent copyist that reproduces with remarkable fidelity whatever you consistently dictate through thought, emotion, and belief. This copying isn't selective or judgmental. It's automatic and precise. If you dictate fear, it copies contraction. If you dictate peace, it copies harmony. The body doesn't argue with your instructions. It simply executes them with unwavering loyalty. This revelation transforms our approach to healing from a battle against symptoms to a conscious realignment of the creative template. When physical challenges appear, they're not random misfortunes or punishments, but faithful reproductions of mental patterns. The solution isn't fighting against the copy, but correcting the original. An architect doesn't tear down a building that doesn't match his vision. He revises the blueprint, and the construction naturally follows. The breakthrough in applying this principle comes when we recognize that we're not victims of our bodies, but authors of their condition. This doesn't mean blaming ourselves for illness, but empowering ourselves through understanding the creative relationship between mind and body. The very same law that allowed disharmony to appear provides the pathway for restoration. Of course, the journey of embodying this understanding requires dismantling our inner objections with craftsmanlike patience. These objections aren't mere intellectual disagreements, but deeply embedded knots in our consciousness that resist transformation. They masquerade as wisdom, but function as barriers to healing. Fear often disguises itself as a wise counselor, presenting worst-case scenarios as being realistic. It pretends to protect us while actually creating the very conditions we're trying to avoid. When we listen closely, we realize fear has no new insights to offer. It merely repeats old stories, projecting past wounds into future possibilities. Its cautionary tales aren't prophecies, but projections. Fatalism represents another subtle resistance, disguising itself as scientific thinking while actually embodying mental laziness. It's genetic. It runs in the family. At my age, what can you expect? These statements sound rational, but actually represent a refusal to consider new possibilities. True. Science remains open to discovery. Fatalism closes the door on potential breakthroughs. The bad luck narrative offers another escape from responsibility, positioning us as passive victims of random circumstance rather than active participants in the creative process. This perspective ignores the law of correspondence by suggesting that our inner state has no relationship to our outer experience, a proposition Jesus consistently refuted through both teaching and demonstration. The liberation process begins not with fighting these objections, but with gentle, persistent recognition of their nature. When fear speaks, we acknowledge this is fear repeating old stories, not wisdom revealing truth. When fatalism suggests limitation is inevitable, we respond, this is mental habit, not ultimate reality. This isn't positive thinking, but accurate spiritual perception. The journey of transformation requires both compassion for ourselves and commitment to truth. We've carried these patterns for years, sometimes generations. They won't dissolve overnight. Yet with consistent recognition of the law of correspondence and patient dismantling of our inner objections, we gradually establish a new creative template that our faithful copyist, the body, begins to reproduce with increasing accuracy. If you've noticed specific inner objections that repeatedly arise when you contemplate healing or transformation, type, "I'm recognizing the pattern," in the comments below. One of the most beautiful insights Jesus revealed through his healing ministry is that health isn't something foreign we need to impose on the body through force or struggle. It's the natural music of the organism. Just as harmony is the natural state of a well-tuned orchestra, wholeness is the natural state of your being. What we call disease isn't a powerful enemy that has conquered territory, but a temporary dissonance in the divine symphony of your body. This perspective shift completely transforms our relationship with healing. We're not battling against some foreign invader with equal or greater power than wholeness. We're simply restoring the natural order by allowing the divine conductor to raise the baton. The dissonance ceases not through combat, but through correction, like a musical passage that returns to harmony when the director gives the proper signal. And who is this director in your case? It's not some external force or remote deity. It's the idea of God recognized in you, the divine template of perfect harmony, acknowledged at the center of your being. When this recognition occurs with clarity and conviction, every cell, tissue, and organ begins to realign with its original design. The body knows this harmony intimately because it was created to express it. This revelation dissolves the artificial boundary between spiritual and physical healing. The spiritual idea doesn't override physical law. It reveals the higher law that has always governed the physical. Jesus wasn't suspending natural principles when he healed. He was demonstrating their ultimate fulfillment. The miracle isn't the exception to the rule, but the perfect expression of it. Behind the scenes of every bodily function exists this divine orchestration waiting to be acknowledged. Your heart doesn't beat because of some mechanical accident, but because the rhythm of life expresses through it. Your lungs don't expand and contract by random chance, but because the breath of spirit animates them. When we recognize this divine director, we're not imposing something artificial, but aligning with what's fundamentally true. This understanding leads us to perhaps the most transformative aspect of Jesus' method: genuine appreciation for the body's fidelity. Most healing approaches subtly position the body as an enemy to be conquered or a problem to be solved. Jesus demonstrated a completely different relationship, one of partnership based on understanding the body's nature as a faithful copyist. The body deserves our gratitude, not our condemnation. It has been loyally reproducing whatever we've been dictating through consciousness, both harmonious and disharmonious patterns. If we've spent years dictating with fear, projecting worst-case scenarios, rehearsing limitation, the body has faithfully copied these instructions. It didn't rebel against us. It obeyed with remarkable precision. This recognition liberates us from blame while empowering us toward change. Instead of lamenting past patterns or condemning the body for its faithful reproduction, we can simply begin dictating with gentle authority today. The same fidelity that reproduced limitation will now reproduce freedom. The same precision that manifested restriction will now manifest release. The mindset shift is profound. We stop treating symptoms as enemies and recognize them as messengers pointing to necessary adjustments in consciousness. We cease battling against the body and begin partnering with its innate intelligence. We release the struggle mentality and embrace the journey of alignment. This appreciation extends beyond physical healing to our entire experience of transformation. In every area where we seek change, we can acknowledge that current conditions faithfully reflect past consciousness, not as punishment, but as precise creation. With this understanding, we shift from victimhood to creative responsibility, from combating effects to adjusting causes. The body's extraordinary responsiveness to consciousness represents one of the most remarkable design features of human experience. It provides immediate feedback on our internal state, offering a continuous readout of our dominant thoughts and emotions. This feedback isn't punishment but education, a perfect mirror revealing what needs attention in consciousness. If you've experienced that moment of revelation, when you realized your body wasn't betraying you, but faithfully reflecting your own consciousness, type, "The mirror doesn't lie," in the comments. To illustrate the subtle art of working with divine principle, let me share a workshop parable that captures the essence of effective spiritual practice. A young joiner, eager to create perfect wood joints, consistently applied excessive glue, thinking more is better. His connections would overflow with adhesive, creating messy, weakened bonds. The master craftsman watched with a knowing smile before finally offering this wisdom. Don't convince the wood, order it. The formula he taught was elegantly simple: little glue, right pressure, silence. The anxious novice couldn't understand at first. Wouldn't more adhesive create a stronger bond? But the master explained that excess glue actually weakens the joint, creating inconsistent thickness and preventing the wood surfaces from meeting properly. The perfect bond requires just enough adhesive, applied with precision, followed by the disciplined patience to allow it to set undisturbed. This workshop wisdom translates directly to our spiritual practice. When working with the divine healing intelligence, we often make the same fundamental error. We overwhelm our subconscious with excessive repetition, emotional intensity, and elaborate visualizations. We frantically affirm the same truth 15 different ways, bombard the mind with multiple healing images, and saturate our inner space with spiritual noise, believing more is better. The revelation behind Jesus' method is that effective spiritual work follows the joiner's formula: clear intention, little glue, gentle authority, right pressure, and protected space for manifestation, silence. The subconscious mind doesn't require endless repetition or emotional manipulation. It responds to clarity, precision, and the space to work unhindered by conscious interference. This understanding illuminates why many sincere spiritual practitioners fail to experience results despite Herculean efforts. They're applying too much glue, overwhelming the subconscious with excessive input that actually prevents proper bonding with truth. The transformation comes not through force, but through precision, the exact right truth, applied with gentle authority, followed by disciplined restraint. This brings us to what might be the most crucial yet overlooked aspect of Jesus' healing methodology, what I call the operative silence. This isn't passive waiting but active protection of the spiritual germination process. It's the protected sowing, the sprout that is not unearthed out of curiosity. When you've planted the seed of truth in consciousness, the real work begins in the silence that follows. Perhaps you're thinking this approach is too simple for complex health challenges or life situations. Our culture conditions us to believe that significant problems require elaborate solutions. The more complicated the remedy, the more effective it must be. Yet Jesus consistently demonstrated the power of elegant simplicity. The operative silence works like water entering through a narrow pipe. If you open the main valve just slightly more, the entire system responds. Behind the scenes of this approach is a profound respect for the natural unfoldment of spiritual principle. Just as a seed contains the complete blueprint for the oak tree, without needing our instruction on how to grow, The truth recognized in consciousness contains everything necessary for its own manifestation without our anxious supervision. Our responsibility isn't to force the process, but to protect it. The mind trained in operative silence understands the counterintuitive truth that less intervention often produces greater results. Instead of constantly checking for evidence, reimagining the outcome, or discussing the process with everyone you meet, you simply allow the inner intelligence to work according to its perfect design. The conscious mind opens or closes the valve. The subconscious is the network of pipes. The body is the house receiving the flow. This discipline transforms not just healing work, but our entire relationship with manifestation. We stop mistaking activity for effectiveness and recognize that some of the most powerful spiritual work happens in the spaces between our conscious efforts. Like the master joiner who applies the right pressure and then moves to another task while the bond sets, we learn to initiate the process with precision and then honor it with our absence. If you've ever experienced that moment when something finally shifted, not during intense effort, but during the quiet moments that followed, type "the silence speaks" in the comments. One of the most persistent saboteurs on the healing journey is impatience, that tense haste that cleverly disguises itself as responsibility or diligence. I should be seeing results by now. Why isn't this working faster? Maybe I need to try something different. These thoughts seem rational, even conscientious, but they reveal a deeper truth. Impatience is simply doubt that doesn't dare speak its name. When we become impatient with the healing process, we're not actually concerned about time. We're expressing a fundamental lack of trust in the principle itself. We're essentially saying, I don't believe this is working, so I need to see immediate evidence. This hidden doubt creates the very resistance that slows our progress, like a person constantly checking if water is boiling, thereby releasing the heat that would bring it to boil. The revelation that transforms this pattern is beautifully simple. When impatience arises, don't scold yourself or abandon your practice. Simply recognize it as disguised doubt and gently turn the key again. Return to the recognition of the one power, restate your declaration with calm authority, and recommit to the protective silence. This isn't starting over, but continuing with greater awareness. Behind this understanding lies a profound redefinition of order itself. Most of us have been conditioned to view order as rigid micromanagement, a tightly controlled system where nothing deviates from prescribed patterns. This misconception leads us to approach healing with the same rigid control, trying to force outcomes according to our timetable and specifications. Jesus demonstrated a completely different relationship with divine order. He understood that true order isn't rigid control, but harmonious orchestration, the concert in which each part fulfills its function in perfect time and proportion. Like a symphony where the stomach rests when it should, works when appropriate, and neither interrupts the lungs nor pretends to be the heart. Divine order allows each element to perform its unique role within the greater harmony. This perspective transforms how we relate to the healing process. Instead of trying to micromanage every detail, we recognize our part in the greater orchestration. We provide the clear recognition, the precise declaration, the anchoring action, and the protective silence. Then we allow the divine conductor to coordinate the countless invisible processes that manifest as healing. Our role isn't to control the entire symphony, but to play our part with excellence. Equally revolutionary is Jesus' definition of love as it relates to healing. Many spiritual traditions present love as variable emotion, intense feelings that rise and fall with circumstances. Jesus revealed something far more powerful. Love is the stable environment of benevolence in which all functions flourish. It's not primarily a feeling, but a consistent orientation that creates the optimal conditions for life to express itself fully. This understanding explains why the emotional climate we maintain internally directly affects physical well-being. If we think with constant harshness, the body hardens in response. If we think with consistent kindness, membranes become more permeable to life. If our inner conversation constantly accuses, fibers tense. If our inner conversation blesses, tissues relax and open to healing currents. The body registers the courtesy or harshness of our thought patterns because mind and body aren't separate kingdoms, but branch and fruit of the same tree. Your cells hear both the explicit commands you give through affirmation and the implicit messages you send through your general mental atmosphere. When we create an internal environment of stable benevolence, we're establishing optimal conditions for divine order to express. The journey of implementing Jesus' method involves a profound recalibration of our understanding of time. Divine principle doesn't operate according to our impatient timetables, but according to its perfect unfoldment. The oak tree doesn't grow faster because we pace around it anxiously. The healing process doesn't accelerate through our worried monitoring. Both follow their innate intelligence when given the proper conditions and freedom from interference. If you've noticed how your impatience often masquerades as responsibility while actually expressing hidden doubt, type "I'm learning to trust the process" in the comments. One of the most liberating skills Jesus demonstrated in his healing method was the capacity to courteously deny negative ideas without engaging in battle with them. This isn't the same as denying facts or pretending challenges don't exist. It's a mature spiritual discernment that distinguishes between acknowledging circumstances and granting them power in consciousness. When a gloomy prognosis, a limiting belief, or a fearful prediction reaches your awareness, you have a choice that most people never realize they possess. Instead of automatically absorbing these ideas into your mental ecosystem, you can respond internally with quiet dignity. I don't receive you as power. This isn't arguing or fighting against the idea. It's simply declining to grant it authority in your consciousness. Think of this practice as being like a doorkeeper who doesn't argue with every persistent salesperson, but simply points to the sign, "No soliciting." You're not obligated to receive every mental package delivered to your door. When you decline negative ideas with courtesy, you're not being in denial. You're exercising discernment about what you allow to take root in your consciousness. This perspective transforms our entire relationship with challenging information. When the doctor shares concerning test results, you can acknowledge the facts while internally responding. I receive this as information, not as final authority. When fearful predictions arise about your condition, you can note them while declining to empower them. This isn't magical thinking, but spiritual governance, maintaining the throne of your consciousness under divine authority rather than circumstantial dictatorship. The hidden wisdom in this approach is that what we politely decline loses its momentum. Just as a fire deprived of oxygen naturally diminishes, negative ideas deprived of our belief energy gradually lose their apparent power. They may continue to exist as concepts, but their ability to shape our experience diminishes when we consistently refuse to empower them. This practice pairs perfectly with learning to affirm correctly, an art that Jesus demonstrated with masterful precision. Most ineffective affirmations fail not because the principle is flawed, but because our application lacks understanding of how the subconscious mind operates. The revelation that transforms our practice is beautifully simple. Affirm briefly in the present tense, with gentle authority. Prayer in Jesus' method isn't trembling supplication to a distant deity, but serene decree from alignment with divine principle. It's not begging for intervention, but declaring from recognition. The subconscious mind, like fertile soil, responds not to emotional intensity, but to clear, consistent seeds. When you understand this, your entire approach to affirmation transforms. A long phrase filled with explanations, justifications, and qualifications is like a broken seed. It contains too many fragments to germinate properly. The subconscious thrives on clarity, brevity, and authority. Divine order governs my body now carries more transformative power than a paragraph explaining why healing should occur, how much you need it, and when you hope it might manifest. The revolution in this approach is moving from prayer as negotiation to prayer as recognition. You're not trying to convince God or your body to do something unusual. You're recognizing what is already true in divine principle and allowing that recognition to reorganize your experience. This is why Jesus never begged in his prayers, but simply acknowledged, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me." The mind shift from supplication to decree fundamentally alters your relationship with the healing process. You're no longer a desperate outsider hoping to gain favor, but an authorized representative of divine principle, speaking from the authority of your true identity. This doesn't mean shouting or demanding. Genuine authority requires no volume because it carries the quiet confidence of truth. The timing of affirmation also matters tremendously. The best time for planting these seeds of truth is when the mental soil is most receptive, typically in the early morning before the mind becomes cluttered, at midday during a brief pause, and especially before sleep, when the subconscious becomes particularly receptive to programming. These natural openings in consciousness create optimal conditions for effective affirmation. If you've noticed how differently your mind receives a clear, concise affirmation versus a lengthy, complicated one, type "brevity is power" in the comments. The art of spiritual economy transforms our approach to healing declarations. Before uttering a single word of affirmation, first, recognize the principle. Establish that inner alignment with divine truth. This recognition isn't merely intellectual agreement, but a felt sense of connection with the one power that governs all life. From this foundation of recognition, your words carry an authority that mere repetition can never achieve. When you speak from this place of recognition, you're not trying to convince the universe or bargain with a reluctant deity. You're speaking like someone turning on a lamp in a dark room, making a clear, decisive gesture without unnecessary flourish or drama, then allowing the light to do its natural work. The illumination doesn't come from the switch, but from the electricity it conducts. Similarly, the power isn't in your words, but in the principle they conduct into expression. This approach revolutionizes our spiritual practice by shifting focus from quantity to quality. Many sincere seekers exhaust themselves with endless repetitions, believing more words create greater impact. The revelation in Jesus' method is that verbal economy paired with abundant recognition creates the optimal conditions for transformation. A few words spoken from deep alignment carry infinitely more power than volumes spoken from divided consciousness. Consider the stark contrast between Jesus' healing declarations and our typical approach. Be clean, take up your bed and walk, receive your sight. Notice the brevity, the clarity, the absence of qualification or explanation. He didn't feel compelled to justify his declarations or hedge them with contingencies. He simply spoke the truth he recognized and allowed it to do its perfect work. The blueprint for this approach emerges from understanding how consciousness responds to truth. Like a skilled archer who focuses completely on the target rather than narrating each movement of their technique, effective spiritual declaration requires singular focus on the truth being expressed. Every added word potentially dilutes rather than strengthens the central recognition. To illustrate this principle, consider the straightening rope metaphor, one of the most practical insights into how consciousness transforms. Imagine a twisted rope that needs to return to its proper alignment. If you apply sudden, excessive force, you risk breaking the fibers. But when you apply just the right tension, steady, gentle, and consistent, the rope naturally returns to its straight condition. Your conscious mind applies this perfect tension when it calmly repeats a true idea, not 50 times in a hurry, but 3 or 4 times with full presence. The quality of your attention matters infinitely more than the quantity of your repetitions. 3 declarations made with complete presence will accomplish more than 100 made with partial attention, while your mind wanders elsewhere. This insight liberates us from the exhausting belief that transformation requires monumental effort. The journey isn't about forcing change through willpower, but about applying the precise spiritual pressure that allows natural realignment. Just as the rope knows its proper form and returns to it when given the right conditions, your body and circumstances know their divine pattern and naturally express it when consciousness provides the appropriate environment. Behind the scenes of this approach is a profound respect for the intelligence inherent in all life. You're not convincing your body to adopt some foreign state, but reminding it of its natural condition. You're not imposing health, but removing the mental obstructions to its natural expression. This is why Jesus could heal with such brevity. He wasn't creating something new, but revealing what was already true in divine principle. The mindset shift this creates is revolutionary. Instead of approaching healing as a battle requiring immense resources, we approach it as a gentle realignment, requiring precise application of truth. Instead of exhausting ourselves with endless repetitions, we conserve our energy through economy of expression and depth of recognition. We trade spiritual quantity for spiritual quality. This principle extends beyond healing to every aspect of transformation. Whether addressing physical conditions, financial limitations, or relationship challenges, the same approach applies. Recognize the principle, speak with economy, apply gentle, consistent tension, and allow the divine pattern to express itself through the path of least resistance. If you've experienced that moment when less effort actually produced greater results in your spiritual practice, type "quality trumps quantity" in the comments. One of the most liberating revelations in Jesus' method addresses a common misconception that derails countless sincere spiritual seekers. If you think you need to feel something extraordinary for your prayer to work effectively, it's time to release that burden. Many abandon their healing practice because they don't feel anything special happening, mistakenly believing their emotional state determines the effectiveness of spiritual law. This hidden truth transforms our entire approach. Spiritual law operates with mathematical precision regardless of your emotional state. The divine principle responds to the recognized idea, not to the fluctuating emotions accompanying it. Just as gravity works whether you're emotionally invested in it or not, the principle of divine healing responds to clear recognition rather than emotional intensity. This understanding frees us from the exhausting pursuit of generating special feelings or maintaining perpetual enthusiasm. The architect doesn't need to feel emotionally moved by his blueprints. He simply needs to draw them accurately. Similarly, your responsibility isn't to manufacture spiritual feelings, but to recognize truth with clarity and precision. The mindset shift is profound. Instead of trying to conjure up the right emotions, we focus on the correspondence between our idea and its divine source. This correspondence, this alignment between our recognition and eternal truth, is what activates transformation. Your emotions might fluctuate wildly during this process without affecting the outcome, provided your recognition remains clear. This explains why some of the most dramatic healings have come through practitioners who felt absolutely nothing unusual during their work. They simply recognized the truth with crystal clarity and allowed the principle to operate without emotional interference. Their personal feelings about the process were irrelevant because they understood that spiritual law responds to the recognized idea, not to how they felt about that idea. The practical application of this understanding is the development of what I call the one-line prayer, a concise declaration that serves as your spiritual anchor throughout the day. This isn't just another affirmation technique, but a practical tool for maintaining alignment with divine principle amid life's challenges and distractions. Your one-line prayer should be approached with the reverence of receiving a tested key. Not as a magical formula, but as a precise instrument that unlocks specific domains of consciousness. Don't worship it, use it. The key's value isn't in being admired, but in opening doors. Similarly, your declaration's power isn't in how inspirational it sounds, but in how effectively it aligns you with truth. The optimal one-line prayer is brief, present tense, and personally resonant. God is order in my now serves as an excellent template because it acknowledges the one power and brings it into your immediate experience. Other variations might include Christ intelligence governs my body, divine harmony expresses through me, or I am centered in perfect wholeness now. The specific wording matters less than its ability to instantly realign your consciousness with truth. The revolutionary approach is using this prayer as immediate spiritual first aid rather than reserved for special occasions. Whenever alarm appears in your experience, whenever inner conversation slides toward discouragement, whenever physical symptoms seem to increase, stop for a moment and say from your center, God is order in my now. This isn't desperate pleading, but calm recognition of what remains eternally true beyond temporary appearances. The journey of embodying this practice creates a new neural pathway in consciousness. Initially, you might remember your one-line prayer only after extended periods of worry or fear. With practice, you'll recall it earlier in the process, interrupting negative spirals before they gain momentum. Eventually, it becomes your default response to challenging circumstances, your spiritual immune system's first response to invasion by fear or limitation. This approach represents a profound shift from reactive to proactive spiritual practice. Instead of waiting until conditions become unbearable, before turning to prayer, you maintain consistent alignment through immediate recognition. The one-line prayer becomes not just crisis intervention, but daily spiritual maintenance, keeping your consciousness tuned to the frequency of wholeness, regardless of external conditions. Behind this practice lies a deep understanding of momentum in consciousness. Thoughts gain power through repetition and emotion. By interrupting negative patterns early with your one-line prayer, you're preventing them from accumulating the momentum that makes them seem powerful and real. You're catching the small deviation before it becomes a major detour from truth. If you've discovered that your most effective prayers often come not from emotional intensity, but from quiet, clear recognition of truth, type clarity over intensity in the comments. Now let's explore a practical diagnostic tool that Jesus consistently employed in his healing ministry, what I call the brief examination of beliefs. This simple yet profound practice reveals the hidden barriers that often block our experience of divine healing intelligence. I encourage you to implement this exercise today before nightfall, while the insights from our exploration remain fresh in your consciousness. Take a few moments of honest self-reflection and write down clearly the 3 primary false powers to which you habitually surrender your spiritual authority. These might include fear of lack, there's never enough, obedience to others' opinions, what will people think, superstition of inheritance, it runs in my family, fatalism of age, at my age, what can you expect? Or any other mental patterns that consistently claim authority in your experience. This isn't an exercise in self-condemnation, but in spiritual clarity. By identifying these false powers with precision, you bring them out of shadow into light, where they can be properly addressed. The very act of naming them diminishes their seeming authority, like turning on a lamp in a room where shadows have been mistaken for substantial threats. Once you've identified your personal triad of false powers, perform this decisive spiritual act. Draw a firm line through each one and declare, with the quiet sobriety of a king signing a decree, you have no power. God is the only power. This isn't magical thinking or empty affirmation, but the essential spiritual discernment that distinguishes between appearance and reality, between temporary conditions and eternal principle. What makes this practice so transformative is its combination of clear-eyed honesty and uncompromising spiritual authority. You're not denying the appearance of these false powers in your experience. You're denying their legitimacy to govern your consciousness. This distinction represents the crucial difference between denial and spiritual discernment. The declaration, "God is the only power," isn't religious sentiment, but precise spiritual technology. It realigns your consciousness with fundamental truth, creating the necessary conditions for healing intelligence to operate without interference. Keep this written declaration in your pocket, not as a talisman, but as a tangible reminder of your decision to withdraw consent from false powers and grant it exclusively to divine principle. Behind the scenes of this practice lies a profound understanding of spiritual authority. We don't create truth through our declarations. We align with what is already eternally true. The one power doesn't become the only power because we declare it so. It already is the only power. Our declaration simply brings our consciousness into alignment with this reality, removing the obstructions that have prevented its full expression in our experience. Now, I want to go even deeper into the precise methodology that Jesus employed in every healing. When we carefully examine the gospel accounts, we discover that his approach wasn't random or improvisational, but followed a consistent, reproducible sequence. He didn't rely on mood, personality, or special circumstances. He systematically applied a specific technique that can be understood and implemented by anyone who grasps its essential components. This sequence consists of 4 distinct movements: seeing the truth beyond appearances, giving the word of authority, requesting a symbolic action that anchors the new reality, and maintaining protective silence afterward. This pattern appears consistently throughout his ministry, revealing not just isolated incidents, but a comprehensive healing methodology, a spiritual technology of transformation. First, Jesus saw the truth, perceiving the perfect spiritual reality beneath the distorted material appearance. Before speaking a word or taking any action, he internally divorced the person's true identity from the error or condition. This inner recognition established the foundation for everything that followed. Without this clear seeing, the subsequent steps would lack power and precision. Second, he gave the word, speaking from that place of clear recognition with quiet authority. Notice that his healing declarations were consistently brief, present tense, and unqualified by doubt. Be clean. Your faith has made you whole. Take up your bed and walk. These weren't desperate appeals to a distant power, but calm acknowledgments of present truth, spoken with the natural authority of one who knows rather than hopes. Third, he requested a symbolic action, a physical gesture that anchored the spiritual realization in visible experience. To the leper, show yourself to the priest. To the paralytic, take up your bed. To the man with the withered hand, stretch out your hand. These weren't arbitrary instructions, but precise prescriptions that helped bridge the gap between spiritual recognition and physical manifestation. Finally, he maintained silence, often instructing those he healed not to publicize what had happened. This wasn't about secrecy for its own sake, but about protecting the newly established pattern during its vulnerable early stages of manifestation. Like a gardener who protects a tender seedling from harsh elements, Jesus understood that the new consciousness needed protection from collective doubt and skepticism. If you've begun to notice this exact four-step sequence in the biblical healing accounts you've read, type, "I see the pattern now," in the comments. Let's examine these powerful healing accounts more closely as they reveal the nuanced brilliance of Jesus' method in action. The story of the leper provides one of the most illuminating demonstrations of the complete healing sequence. When this man approached Jesus saying, "Lord, if you want, you can cleanse me," he expressed both faith and uncertainty, belief in Jesus' ability, but doubt about his willingness. Notice first how Jesus engaged with this man who society had deemed untouchable. Leprosy, in metaphysical terms, represents the profound sense of separation and shame, the belief that one is somehow untouchable to goodness, unworthy of wholeness. Before Jesus spoke a single word or performed any action, he made a critical internal shift. He saw past the disease to the perfect child of God beneath the distorted appearance. This seeing wasn't wishful thinking, but accurate spiritual perception. In consciousness, Jesus divorced the man's true identity from the error appearing on his body. Only from this foundation of clear seeing could the next steps carry genuine power. When your vision clarifies, your word automatically shifts from desperate plea to calm recognition. Jesus then spoke with gentle authority, "I am willing, be cleansed." These weren't magic words, but the natural expression of his clear perception. The declaration carried no hint of doubt, no qualifying phrases, no anxious hope, just serene acknowledgement of what he recognized as spiritually true. The brevity and certainty created the perfect vehicle for truth to express. Then came the symbolic act that anchored this spiritual realization in visible experience. Go, show yourself to the priest. This instruction wasn't arbitrary, but precisely targeted to address the man's deeper need, not just physical healing, but social restoration. Leprosy had excluded him from community. By directing him to the priest, who could officially declare him clean, Jesus was saying, "Leave your hiding place, re-enter common life, reclaim your place in the community." This reveals the remarkable psychological insight within Jesus' methodology. He understood that true healing addresses not just physical symptoms, but the entire constellation of effects that illness creates: isolation, identity distortion, purpose disruption. The symbolic act provided a pathway for the healed consciousness to express itself in tangible, practical ways. The account of the paralytic man reveals another dimension of this method. When friends lowered this man through a roof, everyone expected Jesus to immediately address the physical condition. Instead, he first addressed something deeper: "Your sins are forgiven." This statement confounded onlookers, but demonstrated Jesus' penetrating insight into the root cause of the paralysis. The word sin here isn't referring to a catalogue of moral failures, but to missing the mark, being out of alignment with one's true nature and purpose. When Jesus declared forgiveness, he wasn't pardoning bad behavior, but realigning the man's consciousness with his perfect pattern. He was essentially saying, "Your true target is back in front of you. The mistaken identity that has held you in bondage has no power." This declaration loosened the knot in the mind before addressing the manifestation in the body. Jesus recognized that the paralysis wasn't just a physical condition, but the outer expression of an inner misalignment, a consciousness that had become fixed in limitation. By first restoring the man's spiritual perspective, he created the necessary conditions for physical restoration to follow naturally. Only after addressing this causal level did Jesus speak to the effect: "Rise, take up your bed, and go to your house." Again, we see the perfect symbolic act. The man was instructed to carry the very bed that had previously carried him. This reversal of relationship with the symbol of his limitation represented a complete transformation in consciousness from victim to victor, from passive recipient to active participant in life. The psychological depth of this approach reveals why Jesus' healings weren't temporary fixes, but complete transformations. He understood that genuine healing must address both the invisible cause in consciousness and its visible effects in experience. Without the inner correction, outer changes remain temporary. Without outer expression, inner realizations remain abstract. If you've begun to recognize how certain physical conditions in your own experience might be connected to specific patterns in consciousness, type "I'm connecting the dots" in the comments. The healing of the blind man offers perhaps the most fascinating demonstration of Jesus' precise methodology because it involves such unusual physical elements. While some modern readers might find it strange that Jesus made mud with his saliva, anointed the man's eyes, and then sent him to wash in the pool of Siloam, these actions weren't random or magical. They reveal the Master's profound understanding of both spiritual principle and human psychology. When the disciples encountered this man born blind, they immediately fell into the trap of causal thinking. Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? This question reveals the common belief that suffering must be punishment for some moral failing. Jesus immediately dismantled this superstitious framework. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. With this declaration, Jesus established the correct foundation, seeing the truth beyond appearances. He refused to accept either physical heredity or personal karma as final authority. Instead, he recognized the present opportunity for divine expression. This shift in perspective created the necessary conditions for healing to occur. What's particularly revelatory about this account is the elaborate physical process Jesus employed. Rather than simply declaring sight, he engaged the man in a participatory healing journey. He made clay, applied it to the eyes, and instructed the man to wash in a specific pool. Each element of this process served as a bridge between the man's current consciousness and his imminent transformation. The genius in this approach lies in its pedagogical value, its ability to teach through experience rather than just concept. The blind man wasn't a passive recipient, but an active participant in his healing. Each step he took, allowing the application of clay, making his way to the pool, washing as instructed, represented a yes to the new reality being established. Each action was a declaration of consent, a tangible expression of receptivity to transformation. This reveals a profound truth about consciousness and healing. Physical actions can serve as anchors for spiritual realizations. The body hears and responds to these symbolic gestures, creating neural pathways that support the new pattern being established. When we perform actions that align with our desired state rather than our current limitations, we're literally rewiring both brain and body to support transformation. The journey to the pool also served another purpose. It created space between the declaration and the manifestation, allowing expectancy to build. During this walk, the man's consciousness had time to adjust to the imminent transformation. He wasn't just receiving new eyes, he was developing new perception. The physical journey externalized the inner journey from limitation to possibility. What emerges from these accounts is nothing less than a comprehensive architecture of spiritual healing. It's not about blindly repeating ancient gestures without understanding or mimicking specific words as magical formulas. It's about grasping the underlying spiritual structure that makes transformation possible and applying it with intelligence to current circumstances. Seeing the truth isn't about denying facts, but denying them ultimate authority over identity. Jesus didn't pretend the leper's skin was clear or the blind man could see. He perceived their perfect spiritual identity beyond temporary conditions and held that recognition with unwavering clarity. This isn't magical thinking, but precise spiritual discernment that distinguishes between appearance and reality. The word of authority isn't emotional shouting or desperate pleading, but calm command born of union with divine principle. When Jesus spoke, he wasn't trying to convince God to heal or battling against resistant conditions. He was simply expressing what he clearly perceived in consciousness, the perfect pattern already established in divine mind. The power wasn't in the specific words, but in the consciousness from which they emerged. The symbolic action isn't superstitious ritual, but practical psychology, creating a pathway for consciousness to express through tangible experience. These actions serve as bridges between the invisible realm of cause, consciousness, and the visible realm of effect, experience. They provide the newly aligned consciousness with immediate opportunities to express and reinforce the new pattern being established. The protective silence isn't secrecy for its own sake, but spiritual wisdom that understands the vulnerability of new growth. Like a gardener who protects tender seedlings from harsh elements, Jesus recognized that newly established patterns in consciousness need protection from collective doubt, skepticism, and contradiction. This silence creates a sacred space in which transformation can take root. If you've experienced how taking a physical action aligned with your desired outcome sometimes creates momentum that thinking alone couldn't generate, type "action anchors transformation" in the comments. One of the most practical questions that arises when applying Jesus's method is how to see the truth when physical pain or emotional distress seems to dominate your awareness. When discomfort shouts for attention, maintaining clear spiritual perception can feel like trying to hear a whisper during a thunderstorm. Yet Jesus demonstrated that this precise capacity to maintain unwavering spiritual vision despite contradictory physical evidence forms the foundation of all genuine healing work. The revelation that transforms this challenge into a manageable practice is beautifully simple. With a consistent mental gesture, separate in your contemplation the person from the suffering. This isn't denying the appearance of suffering, but refusing to accept it as integral to identity. It's recognizing the crucial distinction between experiencing pain and being defined by it. In practical terms, this means looking at your brother or yourself as God's work before examining the breakdown. Just as an art restorer sees the masterpiece beneath the accumulated grime, you learn to recognize the divine creation prior to addressing any temporary distortion. This perspective shift isn't magical thinking, but the essential foundation for effective transformation, seeing from cause rather than effect. A simple practice that anchors this perspective involves mentally repeating, without hurry or strain, "Child of God, not of disease." This brief declaration performs the necessary separation in consciousness between essential identity and temporary condition. It's not an attempt to hypnotize yourself into ignoring reality, but a precise act of spiritual discernment that distinguishes between what is fundamental and what is incidental. This perspective doesn't eliminate the need for practical measures to address discomfort, but it creates the inner environment in which those measures can work most effectively. Even medical interventions operate more efficiently in a consciousness that distinguishes between the person and the condition. The body itself responds differently when it's approached as a divine instrument, experiencing temporary disharmony rather than as a fundamentally flawed mechanism. The journey of mastering this skill involves gradual development rather than instant perfection. Begin with momentary glimpses of this perspective, perhaps just seconds of clarity before pain reclaims your attention. Don't judge yourself when the vision fades. Simply return to it gently, like training a puppy that repeatedly wanders off. Each return strengthens the neural pathway until seeing truth becomes more natural than seeing limitation. Now, let's explore the critical role of symbolic action in anchoring spiritual recognition in physical experience. One of the most common misunderstandings about spiritual healing is that it somehow opposes or replaces practical action. Jesus demonstrated the exact opposite. He consistently incorporated symbolic physical acts that bridged the gap between spiritual recognition and material manifestation. The key insight here is that the symbolic act doesn't imprudently challenge prudence or common sense. It simply expresses in small what has been accepted in large through spiritual recognition. It provides a tangible vehicle through which new consciousness can begin expressing immediately rather than remaining abstract concept. If your knees have become timid due to pain or weakness, for example, your symbolic act might be walking a few more steps than usual while consciously thinking, each step confirms the government of divine principle. This isn't reckless disregard for limitation, but gentle expansion beyond its perceived boundaries. The action itself may seem insignificant, but its symbolic value is immense. It represents consciousness expressing through form rather than remaining trapped in concept. The hidden power behind symbolic action lies in its ability to bypass the analytical mind that often creates resistance to transformation. While the conscious mind might continue debating whether healing is possible, the body engaged in symbolic action is already demonstrating new possibility. This creates a feedback loop where action reinforces belief, which inspires further action, a virtuous cycle of expanding demonstration. Jesus tailored symbolic actions to each individual's specific situation and needs. For the man with the withered hand, stretch out your hand. For the paralytic, take up your bed and walk. For the woman with the issue of blood, touching the hem of his garment became her self-directed symbolic act. Each action provided a tangible pathway for new consciousness to express through physical experience. The brilliance of this approach is its balance between acknowledging current limitations and transcending them. Jesus never asked people to perform actions that were so far beyond their current capacity that they would automatically trigger resistance. Instead, he prescribed actions that stretched comfort zones just enough to demonstrate new possibility without activating fear or shutdown. If you've noticed how taking even a small physical action that contradicts your limitations sometimes creates breakthrough where affirmation alone couldn't, type "action speaks louder than words" in the comments. One of the most overlooked yet absolutely critical elements of Jesus' healing method concerns what happens after the treatment. In virtually every healing account, Jesus instructed the recipients to maintain silence about their experience, not to parade the miracle or broadcast the transformation. This wasn't about theatrical secrecy or creating an air of mystery. It was about fundamental spiritual hygiene, protecting the delicate process of manifestation during its most vulnerable stage. This revelation transforms our understanding of the entire healing journey. Most people focus exclusively on the moment of declaration or treatment, believing the critical work is completed when the prayer is spoken or the hands are laid. Jesus demonstrated that what happens after treatment is equally essential to successful manifestation. The tender seedling of new consciousness requires protection from harsh elements that could stunt or destroy its growth. What specifically threatens this delicate process? Curious chatter that dissects the experience, repeated storytelling that keeps the old condition alive in consciousness, compulsive cataloging of symptoms to track progress, and the desperate search for external validation or comments. These seemingly innocent activities create powerful currents that can literally uproot the seed of transformation before it has time to establish roots. Think about the subtle psychology at work here. When you constantly talk about your condition, even to describe its improvement, you're reinforcing its reality and importance in consciousness. When you repeatedly check for evidence of healing, you're actually expressing doubt in the completed work. When you seek validation from others, you're placing authority outside yourself rather than in the divine principle. Working within. The hidden truth is that many sincere spiritual efforts fail not because the principle is flawed or the prayer lacked power, but because of what happens in the hours following treatment. The blueprint has been established in consciousness, but continuous interference prevents its manifestation in experience. It's like planting a seed and then digging it up every few hours to see if it's growing, a process that guarantees it never will. From this understanding emerges what I call the golden rule of operative silence. Maintain 12 hours of disciplined silence after each spiritual treatment. These aren't arbitrary hours, but a sacred container that allows the new blueprint to begin establishing itself without interference. During these 12 hours, commit to a powerful practice. Don't describe the problem. Don't compare current condition to past state. Don't ask for signs of progress. Don't dramatize the situation. This doesn't mean becoming completely mute or disconnecting from life. It means redirecting your energy toward living from the new consciousness rather than continuously monitoring the old condition. Give thanks for the completed work instead of questioning its progress. Attend to your normal duties and responsibilities instead of fixating on symptoms. Let your actions express the new reality rather than your words continuously invoking the old. The mindset shift this creates is profound. Instead of approaching healing as a fascinating journey to be documented and discussed, you approach it as sacred work to be protected and honored. Instead of treating symptoms as worthy of continuous attention, you treat them as passing shadows that don't deserve the spotlight of your awareness. You make a decisive break with the old narrative, rather than continuously editing and updating it. Behind the scenes of this practice lies a profound understanding of momentum in consciousness. Every thought pattern, whether constructive or destructive, gains power through repetition and attention. When you repeatedly discuss a condition, even to note its improvement, you're maintaining its momentum in consciousness. When you maintain operative silence, you allow that momentum to naturally diminish while the new pattern gains strength. Jesus demonstrated this principle consistently. To the leper, see that you tell no one. To the blind men, see that no one knows about this. To the parents of the girl restored to life, tell no one what has happened. This wasn't arbitrary instruction, but precise spiritual technology designed to protect the newly established pattern during its vulnerable early stage of manifestation. The impact of this understanding completely transforms how we approach the aftermath of spiritual treatment. Instead of anxiously looking for immediate evidence, we rest in confident expectation. Instead of nervously discussing the process, we protect it with reverent silence. Instead of continuously monitoring symptoms, we direct attention to living from the new consciousness, regardless of current appearances. If you've ever noticed how discussing a problem extensively seems to give it more life and power in your experience, type "silence is golden" in the comments. Now let's explore the revolutionary approach to communication with your own body that Jesus demonstrated in every healing. When we carefully examine his methodology, we discover something remarkable about the quality and character of his words. The declarations he made weren't just another set of sounds among the countless noises of everyday life. They carried a distinct vibrational quality, an authority that descended through consciousness like order coming down an invisible stairway and putting everything in its place. This quality of communication represents a complete paradigm shift from how most people relate to their bodies. The typical approach oscillates between two ineffective extremes, either barking harsh commands at the body as if it were a disobedient servant, or pleading with it like a beggar, hoping for mercy. Jesus demonstrated a third way, speaking with gentle authority that doesn't dispute, doesn't beg, and doesn't boast. The revelation here is that your relationship with your body determines how effectively it receives your instructions. When you speak from fear, doubt, or desperation, the body registers the emotional charge rather than the content of your message. When you speak from clear alignment with divine principle, the body recognizes and responds to the authority behind your words rather than just the words themselves. This gentle authority emerges naturally from recognition of your true relationship with your body. You're neither its master nor its victim, but its steward, entrusted with its care and direction as an instrument of divine expression. This perspective creates the perfect balance between respect for the body's intelligence and recognition of your responsibility to provide clear guidance from higher consciousness. The tone of this communication matters tremendously. Notice that Jesus never shouted at conditions to change or begged pathetically for improvement. He spoke with the quiet confidence of one who knows rather than hopes, the natural authority of alignment rather than the forced authority of will. This tone creates a receptivity in the cellular intelligence that strained emotion or desperate pleading cannot achieve. Behind the scenes of this approach lies a profound understanding of the body's nature. Your body isn't a mechanical object operating independently from consciousness, but a living field of intelligence that constantly attunes itself to your dominant thoughts and emotions. It doesn't register only your explicit instructions, but the entire constellation of beliefs, expectations, and feelings that accompany them. This is why learning to speak with gentle authority rather than emotional volatility creates such dramatically different results. The breakthrough in applying this understanding comes through a comprehensive methodology I call the scientific treatment, a 5-step process that systematizes Jesus's approach into a reproducible formula. The term scientific isn't used lightly here. Just as physical science follows predictable laws that produce consistent results when properly applied, spiritual science operates according to precise principles that reliably transform experience when correctly implemented. The magnificent simplicity of this approach is that it requires just 5 steps: recognize, unite, declare, command, and seal. This sequence isn't arbitrary, but follows the natural progression of consciousness from recognition of principle to manifestation in form. The form follows the idea when the idea is given without mixture, without contamination by doubt, fear, or contradiction. The process begins with recognition, acknowledging God as the only power and presence. This isn't religious sentiment, but precise spiritual technology that establishes the correct foundation for everything that follows. Before addressing any specific condition, take a moment to consciously withdraw attention and authority from apparent powers and place it exclusively with divine principle. This creates the essential context for effective spiritual work. This recognition isn't intellectual agreement, but felt sense, a conscious alignment with the one power that sustains all life. It's like a musician tuning their instrument to the correct pitch before playing. Without this initial tuning, even perfect technique produces discordant results. Similarly, without recognition of the one power, even perfectly phrased declarations lack transformative impact. The elegance of this approach lies in its combination of profound simplicity and psychological sophistication. It doesn't require years of training or special gifts, just consistent, intelligent application of principles that Jesus demonstrated in every healing. It works not through magical intervention, but through alignment with the same divine intelligence that orchestrates every function of the body when interference is removed. If you've experienced moments when speaking to your body with gentle authority produced results that emotional intensity or desperate pleading couldn't achieve, type "authority over anxiety" in the comments. Let's explore one of the most practical revelations in Jesus' healing methodology, the discovery that certain times naturally facilitate deeper spiritual work. Through careful observation of consciousness, we find there are specific hours when the door to the subconscious mind remains slightly ajar, and just a sober gesture is sufficient for the seed of truth to enter without resistance. These natural openings create optimal conditions for transformation, allowing us to work with the tide of consciousness rather than against it. The deep mind demonstrates remarkable receptivity during 3 distinct periods: at dawn, in the middle of the day, and just before sleep. These aren't arbitrary times, but natural rhythms in consciousness that Jesus utilized with masterful precision. Think of these periods as sacred laboratories where spiritual alchemy occurs most efficiently, where lead transmutes to gold with less resistance than at other times. The dawn laboratory offers unique advantages because the mind hasn't yet accumulated the day's noise and distractions. The mental corridors remain relatively clear, the rooms still quiet, the table set with plates untouched. Whatever you place in consciousness during these first waking moments becomes the cornerstone for the day's construction. This explains why many spiritual traditions across cultures emphasize morning practice. They've discovered the same principle Jesus demonstrated. When you establish recognition of divine principle as your first conscious act, you're essentially laying the foundation for everything that follows. Instead of beginning the day by rehearsing problems or scrolling through digital distraction, you're consciously choosing the template that will shape your experience. This isn't religious ritual, but practical psychology. The first impression creates the strongest imprint. The midday laboratory offers a different kind of opportunity. By this point, the morning has established its momentum, but before the afternoon solidifies patterns, there exists a remarkably elastic interval, a perfect moment for recalibration. The subconscious that awakened receptive begins to fill with the traffic of voices, demands, and stimuli. A brief moment of return to center doesn't stop this movement, but gently redirects it. This midday reset doesn't require elaborate ritual or extensive time investment. Even 60 seconds of conscious reconnection with divine principle can reorient your entire afternoon. I've witnessed persistent pain patterns shift, clouded decisions clarify, and unnecessary urgency dissolve through this simple practice of midday alignment. The investment is minimal, but the dividends are extraordinary. The night laboratory offers perhaps the most profound opportunity for transformation. As the external world dims its lights, the subconscious assumes stewardship of the house. Your last conscious thoughts before sleep become instructions that the subconscious will faithfully process throughout the night with tireless diligence. This explains why Jesus often taught his disciples privately in the evening hours. He understood the receptivity that naturally emerges as day transitions to night. The revolutionary insight here is that the quality of your last thoughts dramatically impacts both your sleep quality and your waking state the following day. If you deliver fear, worry, or resentment to your subconscious as its nightly assignment, it will dutifully process these ingredients and present the results upon waking. If you deliver truth, order, and gratitude, it will work with equal diligence on these materials. This understanding naturally leads us to what might be the most practical yet overlooked aspect of Jesus' teaching, what I call mental Christian hygiene. Just as your body requires regular cleansing, nourishment, and care to function optimally, your mind requires similar maintenance to serve as a clear channel for divine expression. Caring for your physical temple while neglecting mental hygiene is like meticulously sweeping the threshold while leaving the stable door wide open to whatever might wander in. The revelation here is that mental hygiene isn't a devout luxury for those with spiritual inclinations, but a fundamental discipline for anyone seeking wholeness. Your thought environment directly impacts your physical well-being, emotional stability, and spiritual receptivity. Jesus demonstrated this principle by frequently withdrawing from crowds to maintain mental clarity, regularly engaging with Scripture to nourish consciousness, and consistently expressing gratitude regardless of circumstances. The practical implementation involves simple yet powerful practices, beginning each day with recognition of divine presence, feeding your mind with truth rather than sensationalism, regularly cleansing consciousness through forgiveness work, and maintaining windows of silence that allow for interior listening. These aren't complicated techniques, but basic maintenance that prevents the accumulation of mental toxicity. If you've noticed that your mental state upon waking tends to set the tone for your entire day, type "Morning Mindset Matters" in the comments. As we conclude this exploration of Jesus' healing method, I hope you're beginning to see how these principles can transform not just your approach to wellness, but your entire relationship with consciousness and its creative power. The method we've uncovered isn't just ancient wisdom, it's spiritual technology, as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. If this teaching has resonated with you, I'd love to continue this journey together. Subscribe to our channel, where we're building a community of seekers, applying these timeless principles in practical, transformative ways. Each week, we explore another dimension of spiritual science, from specific healing protocols for different conditions to the deeper metaphysics behind every manifestation. What makes this approach so revolutionary is that it doesn't require special gifts, elaborate rituals, or even particularly strong faith. It simply requires understanding and applying the spiritual laws that Jesus demonstrated with such precision. Just as you don't need to understand the intricacies of electricity to benefit from turning on a light switch, you don't need complete theological understanding to benefit from these principles. You only need to apply them consistently. If this message found its way to you at exactly the right moment, type "divine timing" in the comments. I read every comment and love connecting with fellow travelers on this path of discovery. Your experiences and insights enrich our collective understanding of these principles in action. If you found value in today's teaching, a simple like on this video helps it reach others who might be searching for exactly this perspective. The ripple effect of transformation begins with individual minds awakening to possibility, and your engagement helps expand that circle. Right here, you'll find our video on the science of forgiveness, which perfectly complements today's exploration by revealing how releasing old patterns creates the necessary space for new creation. Click over and continue this journey with me as we uncover perhaps the most powerful healing catalyst Jesus demonstrated throughout his ministry. Remember, the same Christ intelligence that worked through Jesus awaits your recognition. It's not a distant possibility, but a present reality, already functioning within you, waiting only for your conscious cooperation.